Hi, this is Rod Santamassimo with the Massimo Group. As we continue our Top Producer series, this time we have a really special guest, and that is Mr. Mark Lester, who's a 25-year veteran of commercial real estate brokerage up in Western Canada. And I get a lot of folks of over 11 years to say, hey, Rod, what I do is different. And quite frankly, I kind of laugh because I say, no, you're not doing anything different. But in this case, we got someone that's actually doing something different. I think it's so unique. In fact, Mark and his team are recognized as North America's foremost experts on marketing of unique properties, such as private islands, waterfront estates, resorts, forestry, land, developments, ranches, distressed properties, and the like. So as you see, Mark is, in fact, he is different. Now, with that said, Mark's got a master's in environmental studies, urban planning and development from New York University, and he focuses on, within this niche, brokerage, landlord rep, tenant rep, and of course, the far focus on land. So with that said, and no further delay, Mark Lester, welcome to this Top Producer series.
Thanks, Rod. Nice to be here.
Well, I got to tell you, this is true. When I looked at the background, I was like, wow, this guy is different. We don't have many folks that are as successful, of course, as you are. That's why you're part of the series, but also in this niche. So what I want to do is I want to start from the beginning. I want to see, before you went to university, what were you like as a kid? What did you do as a kid? Was it always entrepreneurial? Did there influences to be entrepreneurial? Tell me about that.
I think when I was a kid, I don't really recall having a strong desire to do real estate. In fact, the expectation was you go to university, go through high school, you go to university. I was in a high school where probably 85% of my graduating class went on to university. But of course, when I did that, I had no idea what my direction was. Back then, if you wanted to be a doctor, you knew you wanted to be a doctor. But I didn't know what commercial real estate was until I actually had graduated with my master's degree. And so the way I got into commercial real estate was coming through planning, working as a planner for a couple of years, and I did informational interviews with developers. I figured, well, I've got a planning degree. I can go into real estate development because I don't want to be a planner. I don't want to be a municipal planner for the rest of my life. And I talked to probably 20 different real estate developers, and most of them said, go into commercial real estate. Oh, well, what's that? So I learned what that was, and I interviewed with several commercial firms, and I chose to work with Colliers. And then I from there, because I had a planning background, I specialized in primarily doing multifamily land, right? So I kind of, my personal or my professional career evolved in an opportunistic way. I think that's the best way to say it.
Okay, so back now, you went to university, you've obviously mastered in planning, you now have the opportunity to go with Colliers, you're focusing on multifamily land. Get back to those early years. Do you remember what it was like, and what are your most vivid memories of the early years in the commercial real estate field?
Panic. trying to figure out what to do. Here's a phone book, here's a list of developers, make some phone calls. So it's all about developing relationships at that stage in your career, and developing market knowledge. I don't think that you have the confidence to be contacting people in the industry, people that you can possibly do business for, if you don't understand what's happening in the market. So knowledge is king. I've recently hired a young guy here, and I've actually got him treating me like a client. Tomorrow, I've said, give me an overview of what's happening in the market, because you can't make those phone calls if you don't know what's happening in the market. So I really, using my background, I learned what the market was about. But the difficulty there was I also had a whole lot of competition. A lot of people were selling land. And so I was constantly trying to figure out what my niche was going to be, where I was going to fit in that market. And it wasn't until about 5 years later This is probably the mid to late 90s. I had an opportunity to sell an agricultural portfolio. At about the same time, a fellow in the collier's office who'd been there for 30 or 35 years, he passed away, and he sold islands. And he left his files to another guy in the office who was doing office leasing. And I said, well, what are you going to do with those? Because I'm interested. I grew up sailing in an area called the Gulf Islands nearby here. And so I had sold this agricultural portfolio. I then had an opportunity to sell a large ranch because I'd done this. I then got these files for islands, and everything kind of came together in terms of saying, there's a business here that nobody is really pursuing.
Okay, so if I can summarize, you have a planning education that allows you to look at land opportunities, which by nature expands obviously the ranches and estates. And then out of the blue, you've been sailing, you're interested in islands, and next thing you know, something you're interested in becomes a real estate opportunity for you in selling islands. Now, give me something, because look, there's not many folks in North America that sell islands, quite frankly. So what's so challenging or special or unique? I get that, it's surrounded by water, about selling an island. Tell me about that.
I think it's an understanding, and this is where it's a little bit different than selling commercial real estate, where it's numbers. It's a numbers game. In this case, it's an emotional game. So, I wouldn't know the first thing about selling somebody's house in the city.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to selling an island, I really have to be able to play on the emotions of that purchaser or the seller, right? Because the person who owns that island has an emotional attachment to it, and I need to be able to show them that I understand that emotional attachment. And so having that connection to the place, or having that connection to, or at least expressing an understanding of what their connection is important. But selling an island, you're dealing with a whole bunch of other issues. You're dealing with off-grid systems. You're dealing with accessibility. You're dealing with what the value attributes are. And I think that's the really challenging part, is figuring out what the value of a property might be when you don't have all the comparables. You're having to do a subjective analysis of objective information, right? So I'm taking all sorts of different types of properties, and I'm trying to make sense of them with a property that is different than everything else. And so my planning background, before I got into real estate, I also worked as a real estate consultant for a few years. And so often with an island or with a lot of other properties that I deal with, I have to kind of be a consultant to figure out the highest and best use, to figure out what the value attributes are, to figure out what the emotional story might be. There's all sorts of things like that. And so what's different? It's different because you really have to throw a whole bunch of things into the kitchen sink.
Okay. So when you have a typical island, so let's say you have an island that you're selling, and so give me an example, a story if you can, and don't mention any names, obviously, but the valuation of an island. Give me one island you sold and the valuation of that island.
Well, I sold the largest island that I've sold in this market. It ended up selling for about $40 million. Okay. It's about 1,400 acres. There are no comparables. There's nothing that you can look at anywhere in North America or anywhere in the world that would suggest that this is where the value should be. And so in that case, it wasn't a matter of saying, here's the value. I think we went out without a price, and I provided guidance, not a price expectation, but guidance to say, I think that this is probably in the $50 million range. Ultimately, I sold it to a foundation, and that foundation, they deemed that, given all of their experience, and they invest internationally, and they looked at it and said, okay, we think that this is a reasonable price expectation, and ultimately it's negotiated. So there's a classic example where there isn't any. There are indicators for smaller properties, but there's nothing of that size. So it really is what buyer is willing to pay and what the seller is willing to sell it for.
So what makes an island worth 40 million? Is it improved? I mean, are there infrastructure? What makes an island worth that much?
Combination of things. One is that there were 17 titles on that island. So you did have, so there was a threat that it could be developed. It would be unreasonable to develop it because it would destroy the island, but it is, you could do that. It had a lot of timber. So timber, you know, a foundation that's interested in environmental or ecological preservation doesn't want to see that timber taken off the island. You have accessibility. It's in a great location. Again, you know, there's the threat that it could be something else. So of course, my job is to play that threat up when I'm trying to negotiate with the buyer. So and ultimately, it's just so incredibly unique that you know, somebody's willing to pay that kind of price for it.
Okay, so let's talk about your practice and all. And we're actually going to start where we generally end with most folks, but for you, it's a little different. Let's talk about your team. How many members are on your team, and what roles do they play for you?
For 20 years, I had a 3 or 4 person team. And that team included an administrative assistant, an analyst, and a fellow who basically would undertake most of the meaningful underwriting of a property. I don't have that team anymore. About a year ago, I felt that the team just wasn't working as it should. So now I have a junior who I'm training, and I have an administrative assistant, and I'm a lot more lean than I was. I'm not saying that that's the easiest thing. I'd like to be able to ramp it back up because I know that I can't be as productive without that team. But you know, the fellow that I previously worked with, he and I have worked for 20 years together, and you know, things come to an end, and that came to an end. So I'm rebuilding it.
Okay, so I understand that. So and then does your team, and do you use any type of CRM or other technology to make your work as efficient as possible?
I switched over to Client Look as a result of my coach's recommendation last summer.
Okay.
Really effective. Colliers has its own CRM, and Colliers wants everybody to use that CRM in Canada anyway. I find that, you know, some company CRMs, they try to be everything to everybody, so they fail miserably at being any good to anybody. And that's the case with the Colliers CRM, in my opinion. It's too slow. It's not, it doesn't, I needed a light version of that for what I do. I've really enjoyed using Client Look, and I am still learning how to use Client Look.
Well, you'll be happy to hear, Mark, that we are actually, I'm be in Southern California next week, visiting with Michael Griffin, who developed Client Look, and we're very close to announcing a integration of Client Look with Massimo Mobile. So
fantastic.
We hope to have that done and developed and tested by the end of the summer. So we're
wonderful. Yeah, great.
Good. Okay, well, so we got your team, technologies, and Client Look. Now let's talk about, look, you're prospecting, I guess, landowners more than not, right? So tell me about your prospecting efforts. Tell me about, well, if we get there, take me through a typical day. Nothing's typical, I understand, in Mark Lester's life, from the time you wake up with your family, tell us a little bit about that, the time you go to bed. What does Mark do?
Sure. Well, let me see. I generally work out in the morning. So, you know, I get up, I work out, I come into the office after that, and you know, my day is sometimes, unfortunately, a little bit segmented. I absolutely try to block my calendar. It's hard. it's really hard, and I tend to get bombarded a lot by different kinds of inquiries, particularly people wanting me to look at their unique properties and value their unique properties. My prospecting really is focusing on service providers to a great extent. I try to really work the relationships with appraisers, accountants, lawyers, different people who have those relationships with clients. I got a great referral yesterday afternoon from a lawyer who I don't know all that well, but certainly knows me because I'm in the marketplace, and calling clients that I've previously done business with. So that's a big part of what I'm doing, because I find that as I revisit those clients, inevitably business comes as a result of it, whether it is an opportunity to pursue something that I might have previously sold, or whether it is just connecting with people and making sure my name's in the market. So my prospecting has a lot to do with making sure people know that I'm still here, that I'm active, that I do what I do. And because I'm one of the very few people that does what I do in this marketplace, I just want to remind people that I'm the go-to guy.
Okay, so how's your day end? What time do you leave the office?
5:30.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you've gotten to the cadence now. This is awesome that you've gotten to the cadence now where you can put an 8-9 hour day and do what you need to get done instead of margining your life to spend time as you wish with your family, hobbies, or wherever else. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And you know, the thing is that I think the best invention ever was a smartphone. It allows me. My wife and I have a place in the islands, the Gulf Islands, which are near here, and we go there on the weekends. And I can be on the ferry on a Friday afternoon. I usually duck out early in the week during the summers, but I'm on the phone. I'm sending information. I've got my assistant back here sending information out. I'm still doing business, but I'm able to be over in the Gulf Islands in a place that I love and spending time with my wife, which is fantastic.
Yeah, Mark, it's amazing how many top producers that I talk to or we work with that Friday afternoons really on, especially in the summer, they're gone. They're just gone.
Absolutely.
They got to do, and they're going off. That's fantastic. So let's talk about, you said you segment time for your prospecting. Your prospecting is generally new opportunities, but also as you shared me, and I did look at your scorecard before our conversation, it definitely reflects that you're making a lot of other opportunities from your existing clients and or company referrals. So you're really, I mean, you have the, let's say the structure from a pipeline standpoint that we see in most top producers, where it's not all prospecting calls. It's really existing relationships, some new relationships, obviously, and referrals. So you tell us about the first referral side of you, and that is the present side of you. What do you do to market yourself? How do you do that?
That's one of the really valuable things that I found about my coaching, because intuitively I've always known that my presence in the marketplace is what drives business to me. But you know, one of the things that I'm doing right now at 1:30 this afternoon, I have a conference call with the team that I have putting together my new website.
Got it.
And my website is not a listing website. It's more of a content website. It is my carts. It is testimonials. It is blog articles that I'm writing, right? So a big part of what I'm trying to do is have my calling card in the form of a website that gives people the opportunity to see who I am, and really focusing on search engine optimization and making sure that I'm at the top of the list.
I would think when looking up land or island brokers, there probably aren't too many. So I'm glad you're on top of the list.
Well, yes, it's true. But, you know, at the same time, you know, I've got to make sure that I stay at the top of the list, and I have to make sure that I'm on the first page. And so that's just critical for me.
So for you to remain at the top of the first page, and so how far would you go for an opportunity? How far from your office would you list an asset from just a pure distance standpoint?
It depends on the asset, and it depends on who I might be able to work with. I've got an island, a 5,000 acre island currently listed in Lake Superior in Ontario. I'm working with a fellow out of our Toronto office. Now, he's an office leasing guy, but he had the relationship. That's okay. And so I can do that. I sold an island in Fiji several years ago. 15 years ago, I sold an island in Fiji, and um, and it was well worth it. I mean, it was $1 million fee. So, but I get people inquiring for me to sell a piece of property that might be worth $1 million, and no, I just can't do that. I've always got to look and make sure that the business is justifiable. Most of my business is in British Columbia, but if I have the ability to add value to a process elsewhere, and I think that there's enough money in it, I'll do it. I just have to make sure that I've got that support wherever it is so that I can actually be effective.
So another thing to take away for the audience, the reason you're a top producer is you're always looking at ROI, return on investment, return on involvement. If
Yep.
the asset and the deal and the commission, quite frankly, doesn't justify the effort or is simply too low for what you can do otherwise, you're not doing it. I guess the obvious question is, did you get to go to Fiji?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I ended up going. I did. I took my family there one time while I was doing that, so of course I could take a meeting and right off my trip.
Sure.
But I went 2 other times where I visited the island. I went once with the owners who were. The owner was a Japanese corporation, and then another time I went on a site visit with a prospective purchaser from Hong Kong, and the site visit, when you're having to fly 2 hours in a small float plane to get out to the island, is quite an experience, and you can't just do a 1 or 2 day turnaround from Vancouver to go to Fiji. You've got to it's a 5 day trip kind of thing. So, but it's, hey, it was worth it.
So, okay. So it's funny. We have clients who obviously work local markets. We have clients that work regional markets. We have clients and probably brokers who work national, the national scene. You are truly an international broker. You are.
I can be, and I have been. I'm very careful not to stretch my bandwidth too far so that I'm not effective. I have many more opportunities than I pursue because I just don't feel that I'm going to be effective. But I can be an international broker, yes.
So beyond the website you're now crafting, if you're focused on highlight on your strengths, is there any other presence pieces you put out to the marketplace, or more importantly to your investors, network, and so forth, that just keep you top of mind?
I'm constantly doing email distributions. It's interesting. I just had a conversation with my coach last session where he was suggesting doing a monthly list of properties that I have, and I normally carry somewhere between 10 and 15 properties in my inventory. Mm-hmm. But of course, I can supplement that by keeping solds on there. And I think sending out that monthly list on a digital drip is a great idea. And of course, intuitively, I probably knew that was the case, but nobody actually said, "Well, you should do this." So I'm constantly doing primarily email distribution. I'm doing a hard copy postcard distribution. This young fellow that we've just hired, I'm working with him on agricultural land in the Vancouver area. And so he and I are doing postcards and sending those postcards out and then following up with the phone calls on those postcards, because farmland here is worth $100,000 an acre. Yeah. And so, and there's one company that's kind of doing it, but not doing it very well. And then it's residential agents. Well, the way I look at that is it's low hanging fruit. Okay, there is my sort of property prospecting right now, going after.
Okay, so tell me about the future for you, and well, let's first for you. Let's talk about the market first. I'll say here in the U.S. we hear a lot of things regarding this expansion has lasted way too long. In fact, I was actually on the phone with my financial advisors this morning, and they were sharing with me they didn't see this really slowing down for 2 or 3 years, which I find hard to believe. But what are you thinking about, especially there in Western Canada overall, in the market, in the land market, your particular unique niche? How are things going? Is there any slowdown you forecasting, or do you think things continue to go great?
No, it already has been slowing down significantly. And we've got a few things. Our market was, over the last several years, our market was dominated by a lot of mainland Chinese money coming in. Mainland, of course, mainland China and Canada are not really getting along right now. But the Chinese government cracked down on the movement of capital out of China. So that's had an impact on our market. In British Columbia, the province that I live in, we also have a very left of center, some would call socialist government, and they've implemented new taxes on foreign owners, or foreign buyers, I should say, as well as people owning second homes that they don't live in. And so what's happened as a result of that is that the market has slowed because there's less money coming in. It's slowed because there's a perception that the local market is not open for business. And so with all of these things, and we also had an incredibly buoyant market for the previous 5 years. So some would say, you know, it was a bubble market. I'm not sure if that is the best way to describe it, but definitely the market has slowed down. My approach right now is, and I always say, I see my business as being a conveyor belt. I load things on the conveyor belt at one end. I make sure that I'm servicing all the stuff that's on the conveyor belt, and I don't want it to fall off. I want to sell it. But you know, the more I have on the conveyor belt, when the opportunity is there, I'm going to sell that stuff. So I've got to control that product. So I may end up with 20 listings, more than I typically like. And then I just have to work that much harder at servicing those clients and making sure that I'm doing everything that I can. But I think that where our market is right now is going to be marginally seasonal. So I think I'm going to have some sales this summer that are islands or properties that people want to use in the summer. I really do believe that we've kind of reached the bottom of the market right now, and the market is waiting to see where values are before it starts to move. I think that we're there now.
Okay. Well, Mark, and as we're ending up this top producer series with you, if you hear folk, you talk to folks on the street, people come to you and say, "Hey, Mark, I would love to be as successful as you one day. Can you tell me?" And I love this question because it's so bad. Can you tell me what's the silver bullet? And I always say there's no such thing as a silver bullet. But what's the one thing you would tell someone who's interested in either getting into real estate or more importantly, probably someone that's already active as a commercial real estate broker, but simply is stuck? What would you share with them that you've learned that you can do to continue to move your business forward and grow your own personal income and wealth? So what would it be?
There's two things. One is become an expert at whatever you're doing. Absolutely. I mean, knowledge is power and knowledge is money. So become that expert. So find your niche, whatever that niche is, and know your market. If you can't show somebody that you are the expert, then you're toast. And oh geez, what's the other thing? I just had it on the top of my head. I said there were two things, didn't I?
You did.
So one being knowing what your market is. The other is building your personal brand. Build your personal brand. Make sure people know who you are. Make sure that that brand is a positive brand, and that, you know, if you build your niche and you have a unique niche and you build your brand around that niche, people will naturally call you. And I mean, I have to rely on people calling me because I can't say, oh, I'm going to call all the ranches in British Columbia. You know, that's not the way my business works. These are not the kind of clients that want you pounding on their door. These are the people who, when they're ready, they want to be dealing with a professional. But I want to make sure that all of those other people that they're going to go to for advice know that I'm the guy that they should be consulting. So build your personal brand and build your personal brand around knowledge.
I love it. Keen words, very keen. That's why you, Mark, Mr. Lester, are a top producer. So with that said, I know we have we're recording this happening on Thursday. It means tomorrow, hopefully you're going to spend some time on the island starting tomorrow with your lovely bride. But I just want to thank you for your valuable time. I know it's very, very valuable. And thank you, of course, as always, for your trust and business with us. But more importantly, continue moving forward, continue growing your business, get that team right, use your CRM, continue your brand, because that is the most important thing. Mark, I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rod.
Take care.